to the third Glitter Glam Rock podcast. You can now listen to us on Spotify, Anchor FM, Apple Podcasts, and a host of other places, as well as YouTube. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way you won't miss out on any episodes. I'm Greg, and I'm Marty-less today. Marty has got some secret glitter business that he's attending to. So you'll probably get sick of my voice. I'm sick of it already. Anyway, I was talking to some friends the other day, and we were reminiscing about going to the beach in the 70s. What would happen is you'd go to the beach, and at the pavilion they'd have these speakers, really loud speakers, and while you were surfing and catching waves, they'd play 2SM, which was the go-to radio station back in those days, and that was a real glam station. So you'd be catching waves and you'd be hearing the Glitter Band and the Sweet and Slade and Suzi Quatro and all that good stuff. And then after you had your surf, you'd go and you'd buy your hot chips and you'd go to a place called the Golden Q, which was a pinball place. It had pinballs, pool tables, air hockey, and they had a jukebox. And that was pumping out glam as well. And that was the first time that I actually heard Alvin Stardust's My Cougar Chew. And I remember there was this pinball machine called Space Race, and you just couldn't tilt it. So no matter what happened, the ball would be going down the side, it'd be going down the guts, you'd just shake the living shit out of it, and the ball would keep coming back, and we'd be playing it all day. And there were these girls, and they just kept playing this song, My Cougar Chew, My Cougar Chew, My Cougar Chew, and I thought, wow, I really like this song. The guitars at the beginning sort of reminded me of the Glitter Band a little bit. It sounded glammy, but it sounded really different. And I ended up walking over to them and saying, what's this? What are you playing? And they said, it's this new song by this new guy called Alvin Stardust, and it's called My Cougar Chew. So the next day, Marty and I went to our local record store, Harry Cohen's or Fat Angel, one of those two, and we bought a copy each and played the hell out of it. But we still didn't know what he looked like. It was like, because in those days, you'd get a 45 and it'd be in a paper sleeve. There was no picture on the cover. I know you German guys over there are really lucky. I've seen some of the German picture sleeves, and they've got fantastic pictures, especially the ones of Gary Glitter and the Glitter Band, but this had nothing. Anyway, one day he was on the cover of some magazine. It said Alvin Stardust, and I saw him, and he was all dressed in black, and he had that big hair quiff, and it was sort of an Elvis-y look. It wasn't what I expected. He wasn't glammy looking at all, and he kind of looked older. So I'm going to talk a bit about him today. You're listening to the Glitter Glam Rock podcast. So what's interesting is a lot of these glam guys have been around for a long time. Like if you look at Gary Glitter, he recorded his first single with George Martin of the Beatles fame before the Beatles. So he recorded a single before Love Me Do. Bowie had been around since the mid-60s. Slade had been gigging since the 60s. All these guys were around for ages, and all jumped on the glitter bandwagon when that started rolling, and Alvin Stardust was no different. He was born Bernard Jury in 1942, which made him 32 by the time Cougar Chew came out. I guess that's why he looked so much older than everyone else, 32 is a bit old to be making your debut as a teen idol. And but before that, he was the roadie for a band called Shane Fenton and the Fentones. And what happened is they sent their demo out to a record company, and some TV show. And unfortunately, Shane Fenton died in a car accident. And a week after he died, they got a letter saying the record company was interested in them and the TV show wanted them to appear on the TV show. But Shane Fenton was dead. And Shane Fenton's mother said, well, you guys should carry on. So they got their roadie, which was Bernard Jury, to step in. So he became Shane Fenton. And they had 4 singles. They started, their first charting singles were actually before the Beatles, so it was around 1962. So he had 4 top 20 hits in the early 60s. And then he left the Fentones, became Shane Fenton, released a couple of singles. They didn't do anything, and then he just faded off into obscurity. So we fast forward to 1973 or 1974, and a singer-songwriter, Pete Shelley, or Peter Shelley, not to be confused with the guy who released that 80s song Homo Sapien, he had a deal with Magnet Records as a songwriter, singer, producer. So he comes up with this song, My Cougar Chew. He wrote it, he sang it, and he produced it. So that's his voice on Cougar Chew, not Alvin Stardust's voice. And the song started to chart a little bit, or got some radio airplay, so they wanted him, Peter Shelley, to appear on a show. I think it was Liftoff they wanted him to appear on. So he goes on and they said, well, it's the glam era, you've got to glam it up. So he gets dressed as a clown, and he goes on this show dressed as a clown, and as Alvin Stardust, and sings My Cougar Chew. And then afterwards he's like, I didn't like that. I just want to stick to being a producer, writer and producer. Can't we get someone else to be Alvin Stardust? Then someone came up to him and said, do you remember that band Shane Fenton and the Fentones? That guy, the singer, his voice is like almost exactly like yours. We should see what that guy's doing. So somehow they contacted Shane Fenton. They sold him on the idea. And he was to appear on Top of the Pops because the song was charting. And keep in mind, this isn't... for all these years, I always thought it was him singing on this record, but it's not him. So he was supposed to appear on Top of the Pops, and they said, okay, you're going to appear as this clown guy. And he was like, I don't know about that. But then, in the same week, Leo Sayer came on and did I Won't Let the Show Go On, and he was in his clown gear. So he had to come up with a different image. They said, look, everyone's got an image. The Sweet have got an image. Gary Glitter have got an image. You've got to come up with something. So they thought about it, and they thought, well, you've got to do something different. We've got to look different. And they came up with the idea of being opposite to Gary Glitter. So he wasn't going to wear all this outlandish gear. He wasn't going to wear any glitter. He was just going to wear black. He loved Elvis. He wanted to wear that 1968 black leather suit that Elvis wore. He wanted his hair like Elvis, and he wasn't going to dance around like Gary Glitter. He was just going to be still. So that was his image. And then he went and he dyed his hair black. And that was the day at Top of the Pops. So he dyed his hair black, but he had the black dye all over his hands, and he couldn't wash them. So that's when he came up with the idea of the black leather gloves, and he put the rings over the black leather gloves. And then he went on and performed, and he was held the microphone in that weird way that he was holding it, and he didn't move, and he was just pointing and just looking at the camera, and he had this mysterious aura about him. And the next day he was in the papers, the man in black, the man who doesn't move. So that was the beginning of Alvin Stardust. Welcome to the Glitter Glam Rock Podcast. We hope you enjoy your stay. So Cougar Chew was a massive hit. It was number one in Australia. Went to number one in Australia. Went to number two in the UK. No one even knew what it meant. No one even knew what like the words "my Cougar Chew." I still don't even know what it means. Anyway, his next single, which is possibly my favorite Alvin song, "Jealous Mind," again started off with those guitars, those sort of glitter band guitars, and just I don't know. I guess a rewrite of My Cougar Chew. Definitely the same formula, but just a fantastic song. And when I heard that song, I just thought to myself, well, you know what? I'm just going to go out and buy the album. And in those days, I know all you glitter people know that it was glitter rock was mainly singles. It was very singles orientated. People didn't really think about albums. There were some good albums out there. The Glitter Band put out good albums. Gary put out a couple of good albums. Bowie, of course, put out some good albums, and so did Bolan. But everyone else, I didn't think Slade's albums were that good. They had some fantastic singles, but the albums themselves weren't that good. Suzi Quatro had a couple of good singles. Her albums weren't that good. So there was a lot of good singles, but not that many great albums. And to my surprise, Alvin Stardust album, which was called The Untouchable over in Europe, but in Australia it was called My Cougar Chew. Same cover and everything, but instead of saying Untouchable, it said My Cougar Chew. I thought that album was pretty good. So if you look at the album cover, it's Alvin standing there, black stage, everything's black. He's live performance supposedly. He's standing there holding the microphone the way he does. He's got his arm sticking out, and there's all these girls' hands up in the air trying to reach him, but they can't touch him. Hence, the untouchable. And I remember there's one girl. She's got rings on her fingers. I remember Marty saying, "Oh man, she must be married. This guy, even married women are after this guy." And it had some good tracks on it too. It had the two singles. It had My Cougar Chew. It had Jealous Mind. Had a song that I liked at the time, Be My Judy, and The Bump. It had a song called I'm in Love Again, which I always thought should have been a single. That should have been a single for him. Another song called High Fever, and his signature tune, Dressed in Black. And right at the end, the last song was called Guitar Star, and that was a bit of a rockabilly song, which I didn't like, and which was sort of like, I guess, a precursor to what was going to happen later on. I also remember there was this big thing in the magazines comparing Alvin Stardust and Gary Glitter, not their music, but their age, who was older, and Gary Glitter came out and said Alvin Stardust was his father, and Alvin Stardust said Gary Glitter was his uncle, because they were both the oldest guys that were going around. Anyway, the next single after that was called Red Dress, which it didn't get much airplay in Australia, and I didn't mind it actually. I didn't go out and buy it. I didn't mind it. And after that, you, and the formula was sort of like starting to wear a bit thin. A friend of mine had the second album. I listened to it. There was too much rockabilly on there for me. So Alvin Stardust's star started to fade a bit for me. I should go on to say that other than My Cougar Chew, which was sung by Pete Shelley, um, Alvin or Bernard did sing the rest of the songs. And you can tell the difference if you listen to Jealous Mind and My Cougar Chew side by side. You can hear that they're different voices. And he was so popular at one time that his band tried to do a glitter band. They were called Alvin's Heartbeats, and they released a couple of singles, but of course they didn't have any success. Later on, he split with Peter Shelley. Later on, Pete Shelley tried to convince him to record G Baby and Love Me and Love My Dog, which Alvin didn't want to do, and so Pete did them himself, and they became big hits. And Alvin regretted that later. He said, "Well, what am I doing, sitting here rejecting these hits?" Anyway, his star sort of faded in the '70s, and he came back. He came back in the '80s with a couple of rockabilly songs, and he died at age 72 from prostate cancer. And R.I.P. Alvin, you did provide some really good times. A little bit of glitter, a little bit of glam. The Glitter Glam Rock Podcast. I'd like to talk a little bit about the one-hit wonders, or what we thought was the one-hit wonders in Australia. There was a magazine called Music Star, which was an English magazine, but it was our go-to magazine here in Australia. There's another one just called Star, and one called Look In. We used to buy those and would be looking for pictures. Marty and I would be searching for pictures of Gary Glitter and the Glitter Band and the Sweet, so we could put it up on our wall. But we'd also see these other bands that we'd never heard of, like Mud. We'd never heard of Mud. Mud never had a hit in Australia. But there's always these pictures of Mud. Lindsay DePaul, never heard of her. I thought she was really cute. I even put her picture on my wall, but I'd never heard any of her songs. Those people never got played on Australian radio. And then you had bands like the Rubettes, who had a massive monster hit with Sugar Baby Love in Australia. It went to #1, but then never heard anything again from them. So, you thought they were one-hit wonder. Also, See My Baby Jive by Wizard. Big hit again. Never heard anything from them again. Barry Blue, Dancing on a Saturday Night. He was on a compilation album. That was a top 10 hit here. Never heard anything again. We thought they were one-hit wonders. And it wasn't until, I don't know, around 2012, I was somewhere in Germany, and I walked into a bar and I heard this song and it sounded glammy, and I thought, 70s, definitely 70s. And I thought, who's this? I thought it might have been some German band. And I went up to the barman. I asked him, and he handed me the CD, and I was having a look, and it was the Rubettes with Jukebox Jive. And I thought, wow, that's a great song, And then the internet came along, and it wasn't until the internet that you could hear these things, So I'd looked up Mud straight away because I'd read in the magazines that their songs were written by Chin Chapman. And the first song I heard was Tiger Feet, which I really loved. I really loved Tiger Feet. But the song I really liked was Dynamite. I loved Dynamite. Dynamite was because it sounded like the Sweet. And I read later that the Sweet actually rejected it. And a band called Hello recorded a version of it as well. It's not as good as Mud's version, but it's pretty good. And you should check out the Hello album. That's another band that we used to see in the magazines that we'd never heard of. But the Hello album was actually produced by Mike Leander, and it's got that glitter sound to it. But there was one person that was in those magazines that was huge in Australia, and that was the Queen of Glam, Suzi Quatro. Now, Suzi was huge in Australia. She was really big in Australia, and for some reason, she was always on Countdown and Sounds, which the other people weren't. I guess there weren't a lot of glitter girls around, and I remember seeing her. The song was Can the Can, her first single, Can the Can. And Marty went out and bought it straight away. And, when we used to buy the records, we used to look at them. We used to read everything. And we saw that it was written by Chin Chapman. So, the people who'd been writing for Sweet. And I thought to me, it sort of sounded like a Sweet reject. But it had the drums at the beginning, and you could kind of tell they were trying to copy that glitter sound. And she was massively popular with the girls, the tough girls. around the neighborhood. I remember there was a couple of girls across the road, and they'd fancied Suzi, and they tried to look like Suzi, and they were acting like Suzi, and that sort of gave those kind of girls, the tomboys, that gave them a bit of an outlet into the glam era. So Suzi was another one of those. She'd been performing since 1964 when she was 7 years old, and she was in a band with her sisters. Her sister formed a band, a garage band called the Pleasure Seekers, and she was discovered in America when Mickey Most, who owned RAK or Rack Records, was over in the States, saw her, and he thought, I'm going to bring her back to England. I'm going to do something with her. This girl's got talent. And of course, when he brought her back, it was like in the middle of the glam era. And they recorded a single called Rolling Stone, which went to #1 in Portugal, but didn't do anything anywhere else. And he was looking for a vehicle for her. He was thinking, what can I do with her? And that's when he brought in Chin and Chapman. But Suzi was pretty headstrong, and she'd stipulated, she didn't want to be a pop glam girl. She was into the hard rock. She wanted to be a hard rock glam girl, and she told Mickey Most that. And luckily for her, Chin Chap were writing hard rock songs for the Suite at that time. So they wrote Can the Can for her. She went on Top of the Pops, and it became an instant #1 in England, and it was a big hit in Australia as well. This is the Glitter Glam Rock Podcast. Thank you for listening. So here you had little Suzi Q. She was only about 18 at the time. She had a #1 hit, all dressed in leather. This tough girl singing hard glam rock. A lot of the boys had a crush on her. The girls wanted to be her. I personally didn't have a crush on her. I don't know why. She wasn't my type. I actually had a crush on Marie Osmond. I had a picture of Marie Osmond on my wall, and was absolutely head over heels in love with her. Hated her music, couldn't stand her music, but had a crush on her. Anyway, back to Suzi. The next song, look, I remember seeing an ad for a compilation album we had in Australia called Unreal, and it gave you little snippets of what was on it. I Love You, Love Me, Love was on it, and 48 Crash was on it, which to me is the quintessential Suzi song. So she had a little, a good little run of singles, Can the Can, 48 Crash, Daytona Demon, and Devilgate Drive, which was an absolute monster in Australia. Devilgate Drive was so big in Australia. It was #1 for ages. It was on Countdown every week. And I read later that the Suite actually wanted that. And they'd already taken the 16s off Suzi, but they wanted the Devilgate Drive, and Chin Chap said, "No, this is for Suzi. We're giving it to Suzi." Mike Chapman said he really, out of all the people that he worked with, he really loved Suzi. Suzi was like nice and kind, and she was great fun to work with. And she got a bad review for something. I can't remember what it was for, but she got a bad review, and Chapman was so pissed off at the journalist that he went out and he bought a big fish, a big mullet, wrapped it up in newspaper, put it in a gift box, and sent it to this guy. And of course, Suzi never got a bad review from him again. And Marty bought a couple of her albums, and I listened to the albums, and they were okay. Of course, I like the Chin Chapman songs; they were the best ones. Another great single she had was The Wild One, which was there was a slow version and a fast version. I really liked the fast version, and then she still she kept having a couple of hits. I remember. Oh, I think it was in about 1980. She came out with a song called Rock Hard, which was really big in Australia. But before that, she had a couple of minor songs like Roxy Roller, Tear Me Apart, I May Be Too Young, Bit Off More Than I Could Chew. And then they teamed her up with Chris Norman from Smokey. And, they did Stumbling In and a couple of duets like that, which I wasn't into at all, really. But Suzi's still going. She's 70. She looks fantastic. She's got some radio show in the UK. I listened to bits of it. She's fun to listen to. She mustn't have done much drugs and drinking back in the day, and she's probably going to outlive everyone. So Suzi became very influential. She was like the mother of the Runaways. I remember in some documentary, I think it was a Runaways documentary, they had an interview with Suzi, and she was saying every time she would come out of a hotel room when she was touring America, there'd be this little girl sitting there who looked exactly like her. And she'd never say anything. She'd just look at her, and that girl ended up being Joan Jett. And Joan Jett went on to, of course, form the Runaways, and they did Cherry Bomb, which kind of sounds like a Suzi song. And Joan Jett went on to a massive career. She actually covered another band who we used to see in the magazines but never heard of in Australia, called the Arrows. They had a B-side called I Love Rock and Roll, and Joan Jett covered that and had a monster hit with that. You're listening to the Glitter Glam Rock podcast. Yeah. Which brings us to Slade, the most glitter-stomping band of them all. Everyone I knew loved Slade. Like, whether you were a Bowie fan or whether you were a Gary Glitter fan, doesn't matter who you liked, everyone loved Slade. They formed in 1966 as Ambrose Slade and had 17 consecutive top 20 hits and 6 number ones in the UK British charts, and they were monsters in Australia, absolute monsters in Australia. The first song I remember of Slade was Come On Feel the Noise, which was on that compilation album that Marty and I were talking about called Fantastic, and I loved it straight away. Slade were probably the most influential glam band of them all. You have people like Nirvana, the Ramones, Sex Pistols, the Runaways, the Clash, Kiss, Motley Crue, Poison, Def Leppard, Twisted Sister, Quiet Riot, Cheap Trick. All those guys say that Slade were a big influence on their career. I remember Kiss, reading an interview with Kiss, and they were saying when they wrote Rock and Roll All Night, they had Mama, We're All Crazy Now in their minds. They said, let's write a song like Slade, and that's how Rock and Roll All Night came out. Quiet Riot covered a couple of their songs and had big hits in America. Kiss also, Paul Stanley was saying that his mirror guitar was influenced by Noddy Holder's mirrored hat. And Noddy Holder tells the story that Slade were recording one day, and in the studio next to him was John Lennon. And he had to talk to John Lennon, and John Lennon said he liked Slade. He said those Slade singles reminded him of the early Beatles singles, and I can kind of see that, She Loves You and all those songs, with the chanty choruses. And you have to remember that when the Beatles came out, that was pretty much hard rock. When they first came out, everything was really ballady, and the Beatles came out with those songs, and they were an influence on Slade, and Slade wrote songs that sounded like that, but with a bit of a difference. Slade were considered the premier glam rock band. Their records outperformed T-Rex, who sold a lot of records, Sweet, Suzi Quatro, Mud, Gary Glitter, Roxy Music, and David Bowie. They achieved 12 top 5 singles in the UK between 71 and 74, 3 of which went straight to number 1. And of course, their biggest song was "Merry Christmas, Everybody," which I don't remember hearing in Australia. But that's charted so many times. It charts like nearly every Christmas. And I remember like everyone I knew had Slade Alive. Everyone had Slade Alive in their record collection except me. And or they had singles, or they had some other kind of album. But when they first started, they had a skinhead image. So they came out. They were produced by Chaz Chandler, and he thought a skinhead image might go down well. And if you look at the early pictures, they've got their heads shaved, they've got the bobber boots on, they look like skinheads, they look really tough. And that image sort of didn't sell well. So when the glam era came up, oh man, boy did they glam it up. Especially Dave Hill. He was the guy that I kind of remember most in Slade. He'd just wear all this outlandish glitter. He'd I read in an interview that he'd come in dressed up. No one was allowed to see him in Top of the Pops when they were performing Top of the Pops. No one was allowed to see him, and then he'd just walk in, and the band would roll around laughing, and he'd say to them, "Well, you know what? You write them, I'll sell them." And Slade was such an influence on Oasis. I think Oasis covered "Come On, Feel the Noise," but if you listen to a song called off the Flame album, Slade Flame album called "Far Far Away," it sounds like every bloody Oasis song they ever wrote. They really used the Slade formula to even though it's not obvious, they use that Slade formula for a lot of their big hits. So their first number one in the UK was "'Cause I Love You," which we didn't really hear in Australia. And then they had "Take Me Back Home," which again we didn't really hear. And it wasn't until "Mama We're All Crazy Now" came out in Australia that Slade Mania, I guess, started. That was a number one, and they had "Goodbye to Jane," and then "Come On, Feel the Noise," which was another number one, which was really weird. "Mama, We're All Crazy Now" and "Come On, Feel the Noise." I remember when I was young, I couldn't really tell the difference between those songs. They're very, very similar sounding. And then they had "Squeeze Me" and "Please Me," and I remember "My Friend Stan," and but mostly it was that Slade Alive album, which was really big. And then they had that film Flame. I don't know if you've seen that film, but it is a really good rock and roll film. It's not one of those, we're a popular band and everyone's chasing us around. It's about a working class band that make it big, and it's about how the music business is run by the mafia. It's actually quite a pretty dark rock and roll film, something really different, and it's really worth watching. And the soundtrack of that is great. I think that Flame album is probably their best album. I watched it just recently. I think the whole thing is on YouTube. You should check it out. And they had a little bit of a comeback in the 80s, around 1983, with "Oh My My" and "Run Run Away," which actually they were in. "Run Run Away" made the American top 20, and "Oh My My" was in the top 40. So they were around for a long time. I remember though, after those stomping glitter hits, they started releasing all these sort of like depressing, or to me, they were sort of like depressing ballads, which I didn't like at all. So Slade were one of those 70s bands that wrote their own songs. Noddy Holder and Jim Lee wrote them all. And of course, when you have that situation happening, the songwriters become much richer than the other two. And then there was infighting. And in the end, Noddy couldn't handle it anymore, and they just broke up, which was a shame. I think that all of them are still alive. A reunion, a Slade reunion, would be absolutely massive. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank Glitter Girl Grace again for sending me some Slade shots Slade performing in Melbourne in the 70s, in the height of the glam era. Fantastic shots. Absolutely great. A little bit of glitter, a little bit of glam. The Glitter Glam Rock Podcast. We've had a few emails, people asking about Australian glam. So even though glam was huge in Australia, there wasn't really many Australian glam bands. There was Hush, which Marty and I have spoken about. There was another band called Supernaut, who were pretty good. You should check them out. They had a good song called Too Hot to Touch, and another one called I Like It Both Ways. There was the Skyhooks, who looked very glammy. They dressed very glammy, but, you know, they were sort of like pop rock. But there was one guy who the guys from the Easy Beats, Vanda and Young, songwriters from the Easy Beats, had written a song called My Little Angel and Can't Stop Myself from Loving You. And they were looking for someone to do that. They came up with this guy. They found this guy called Johnny Cave. They ended up calling him William Shakespeare. And they dressed him in sort of medieval glitter clothing. And he had a couple of hits with those songs. Can't Stop Myself from Loving You is a very good song. You should check that out if you can. Anyway, he looked like he was going to be something big, and then one day he comes home and there's two schoolgirls in his bed, and one thing led to another, and next thing his career was over. There was also another band called Sherbet who dressed in satin, but you wouldn't call them glam at all. There was nothing like the British glam. Nothing at all in Australia like the British glam. And people have also asked us to do an episode on Queen and an episode on Bowie. And although we love Queen and Bowie, I don't think it'd be appropriate for us to do that. I mean, those guys are so well documented. There's so many documentaries and podcasts about those guys. We couldn't really add anything new except to say... I remember the first time I saw Queen, it was the film clip for Killer Queen, which I loved straight away. And Marty and I got right into Queen. We bought all their albums up to jazz. And Bowie, the first time I saw Bowie, was the clip for Life on Mars, which really freaked me out. You know, he had those different colour eyes. He had that orange hair. I didn't know whether he was a guy or a girl. Later on, I got right into the albums Hunky Dory and Ziggy Stardust. I still play them a lot, but as I said, you know, so much has been said about those guys by people who are, you know, very much more knowledgeable than we are. I don't think we'll go there. Well, that's it from me today. As I said, you can check us out on Spotify and iTunes and all over the place. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you get the latest episode. You get a notification of the latest episode. I'd just like to say hello to all those glitter glam people out there on Facebook. And hopefully next week... good old Marty would be back from his secret glitter mission, and we can do something. We're thinking of doing a couple of the glam movies like Jesus Christ Superstar. Although you might not think that's glam, we'll explain to you why we think that's glam. And Tommy and maybe the Rocky Horror Show. So keep glittering on, everybody. Oh, one more thing I'd like to mention. If anyone's got any questions, you can contact us on our YouTube page. Just send your questions there and we'll get to them and we will answer them. See ya.